There's a fundamental misunderstanding of what makes a great guitar. Some folks think it's precious woods, others believe it's traditional build practices. Some people chalk it up to where it's made. I built my first guitar in middle school and a few since then. But owning a retail shop for the last many years, I've learned a lot about what people generally think goes into a great instrument. And not everyone is necessarily looking for the same thing, but it's always very obvious when the general consensus that is the internet has sent somebody into outer space. They'll read on a forum or see in a video about this tone wood versus that one, this pickup versus that kind of pickup, or bone saddle material. Things that do produce different results but don't really matter at all until you consider the other 100 variables that contribute to the sound of the guitar. I've seen hundreds of people buy the be-all, end-all of guitars. They finally got the one they wanted, only to sell it a few months later. It had all the qualities they were after. It checked all the boxes. Yet it wasn't the one. The search continues. I started playing guitar when I was 14, and that was a big change of pace for me. I grew up a very active kid, played lots of sports, was always outside. When football season ended my 8th grade year, I think I must have been a little stir crazy. My dad had lots of guitars lying around. He had actively played the local music scene since he was a kid, and my granddad played for the majority of his life too. So I think at 14, my mind was just starting to steady enough to take interest in the guitar. I was your typical musically inclined kid. I'd pick out a TV jingle on the piano, but I had not yet seriously pursued music as an art form. I found my stride pretty quickly with the guitar, though. It was almost as if I always kind of knew how to play, and I was just now kind of hammering out the actual mechanics of it. Within the year, I was playing twice a week at church and with my dad's band on the weekends. I accompanied friends and aspiring artists at different local shows, different events. Lots of church camps. About 3 hours before I walked across the stage at my high school graduation, I was landing at DFW Airport, coming back from playing a summer camp in Estes Park, Colorado. Needless to say, I was not in my class picture. I haven't even got into my years of playing for a living yet, but even then, it was not about the spotlight for me. I never labeled myself as an artist. I saw playing music as providing a service. I'm very comfortable on a stage, but it's never been something that I inherently gravitated to because there was an audience. Now, making music with your buddies is something kind of special. Worshiping the Creator is a different level of fulfillment. But I think it was the guitar itself that really retained my interest the most. The guitar was my outlet for expression. My first guitar wasn't a bad guitar at all that got me started. But it wasn't very long before I realized my ability was only as good as my instrument. I think this is where I started to forge my own path. Subconsciously, I think I set out at 14 years old to find the best guitar I could possibly equip myself with, even if I had to build it myself. And this is my first attempt at a guitar. The construction of it is basically like if you were to take if you were to start to build a neck through electric and then hollow out the body and throw an acoustic top on it, you would get something like this. Not a bad attempt for a 14-year-old, really, with literally no luthier experience at all. It didn't blow up when I put strings on it, obviously. And this is when I built probably my senior year of high school. I had a little more trial and error behind me by this time, and I had more tools. But I was also probably more open to receiving insight. My granddad, incidentally, had built a couple dozen guitars in his retirement, just as a hobby.
He was done building by the time I started, so regrettably we never built one together. But he helped me out just by some of the things he said, just talking guitars.
And then after high school, I put the building down for a while. I went to college, got a degree in audio engineering, the only field I thought I could get a degree in, and then I started playing music full time. I still played at church every week, but the majority of what I did was just me and an acoustic guitar. Every Friday, Saturday night, I was playing somewhere. Different restaurants, places around town. And when it's just you and your guitar, you become very discerning about what it really is you're using to do your job. I had been installing pickups for friends and fellow musicians and for myself for several years, but around this time in my early 20s is when I really started tweaking pickups. Incidentally, I had taught myself pretty heavily about tube amp design when I was still in college. I hand built and sold a number of guitar amps just to make a little extra money on the side. So needless to say, I had a pretty solid understanding of certain kinds of circuitry. So for the acoustic pickups, I started out by simply mixing and matching different preamps with different transducers. Try multiple transducers, things in stereo. I swapped resistor and capacitor values on existing preamps and dial things in a little differently. All the while, taking these guitars to the gig that night and depending on that pickup to get me through the evening. It was about as thorough R&D as you can get. And just because it sounded good at the bench in a controlled environment doesn't mean it's going to sound great on a stage where you have an existing noise floor, people talking or singing along, dishes clattering, flames shooting up in the kitchen. There's an infinite amount of external factors in a public environment that are going to drown out or absorb different qualities that you may like or not like about a pickup. By the time we opened Morrison Guitar Shop in 2016, I had a preamp that I had built of my own design that sounded great, but it was too laborious of a build to make sense as a retrofit for anything, so I shelved it. And then I think around spring of 2019, I had the inclination to build an acoustic guitar again. I still had some of the more specialized tools from years ago, but we didn't really have the space at the shop at the time. So I actually built a small climate-controlled building at home. I built the whole space by myself, which I wouldn't advise anyone do if you can help it. And then I proceeded to build a handful of acoustics that fall, and that kind of officially got my feet wet again. And then March of 2020 came.
The breaking news, stay at home, that is the order tonight from 4 state governors.
The world stopped, literally, and Morrison Guitar Shop was quickly deemed a non-essential business. We had to shut our doors. Now, we still kind of operated on the down low. My dad, Brett, had literally just retired from his job and had planned to help me at the shop on the day-to-day, but his first order of business was to have set up all the incoming calls to be bounced to his personal cell phone. So we essentially operated as kind of an appointment-only curbside business for the majority of the year. But it wasn't very long before we realized the real problem for us was that we weren't going to be getting any new inventory from anywhere for a while. I was in that wood shop every day building guitars. We had to have something on the wall when we reopened, whenever that was going to be. And I think by the time we did, I had fleshed out about 9 or 10 guitars. Everything handmade, even the pickup. The demand was immediate. People had not really ever seen a guitar shop that produced its own line of hand-built guitars, acoustic guitars no less. As time went on though, the fallout from the pandemic still loomed. We were still having trouble getting inventory well into 2021. So we made the decision to dedicate some of our retail space to the production of our own guitars. I enlisted my dad and my Uncle Danny to help me build. And with everybody pitching in and the added space and some new tooling, we definitely established a program. For a while there, we were stringing up a new guitar about every 10 or 12 days. But it grew tiresome. Building a guitar efficiently requires some real rhythm. There's a lot of gears that need to be spinning. And sometimes I would go back to the shop after hours or even after a gig to set a glue joint or finish part of one process so it would be ready for the next part of the process the next day. All the while, we still have a retail store to run too. It was a heavy load to carry, but by about winter 2022, we could start to see the light at the end of the tunnel. We were finally starting to get inventory from the time we would order said inventory to the time it would arrive in a much more timely fashion again. And by January 2023, we were filling the wall hangers with new guitars that we didn't have to make. And we finally took back some of our retail space because we needed it. And at last, I could kind of catch my breath. We no longer had to literally make our own inventory just to keep the shop alive. And I made the decision to stop building a second time. Now, one thing we got a lot of when we were producing guitars was unanimous approval of not only the guitars, but our pickup. People would say, could you put that pickup in my guitar? It was a simple no, just from the standpoint that the preamps I was making by hand at the time wouldn't fit near the sound hole on most guitars. But around the 187th time somebody asked, I thought maybe I should figure up something of a retrofit that I could draw up to be smaller, a little more streamlined, and have professionally made in bulk. It was quite the project. I had to learn how to draw a printed circuit board using Eagle Design. I had to source every component from sources that could provide large quantities. I added a mic capsule to the design, and I had to make the whole board small enough to fit near the sound hole of most any guitar without it colliding with the bracing. I probably drew the whole thing from scratch about 12 or 13 times before submitting it to a company down in Houston that could mass produce it. And as a result, we now offer the Morrison Cadence pickup as a retrofit pickup solution, and everybody that's gotten one loves it. And that got me thinking, if we could have one company produce the pickup, now, I'm not an abundantly prideful person, but there is something difficult about handing over the reins to someone else to produce a product with your name on it. But I would be disclosing everything to make sure that it was still one of ours. I looked everywhere for like a private label luthier company that provided such a service, but couldn't really make heads or tails of anything I found. So I reached out to a company that I had emailed back and forth once upon a time about custom cases for the guitars that we were making. And I sent them a new email and said, do you know of any companies in your part of the world that can make custom guitars? They got back to me and essentially said, well, there's a few. What kind of guitars? I said, the best ones. They said, we can get you in touch with what is not really a company, but kind of a family of companies that build a number of different products for a number of different vendors in your kind of business. I can hear somebody right now saying, why would you seek to farm out your own brand? Why would you not expand your operation, hire people, teach and train new employees? That is what we did. That's how Morrison Guitar Shop survived the pandemic and its fallout. But there's a reason you don't ever see a full service and retail guitar shop and a manufacturing company under the same actual roof. This was very much a new kind of goal, almost a personal goal. So I got an email back from a sales rep on behalf of a manufacturing group saying, hi Mitchell, these are the kind of things that we do. Let us know how we can be of service, and we're excited to assist you. We know exactly who you are. We've seen your build video on YouTube. I'm sure they Googled Morrison Guitar Shop and found that video. But nevertheless, I said, can you send me a sample? So they sent me a copy of a very popular Dreadnought acoustic guitar, and it came in, and I looked it up and down and hit a lick on it and looked at it some more and thought, man, I don't have to specify a whole lot. These guys have it figured out. Nonetheless, I drafted total blueprints. Not just bracing, but scale length, string spacing, headstock logo, all the kinds of dimensions. And they were receptive to every last detail. And the very first guitar I had them produce is actually a copy of my own personal guitar, one I had built for myself. They nailed it, quite honestly, and we offer it now as both an OM and a dreadnought, and in a variety of different tone woods. So although I no longer personally build a guitar, I still have more to do with each guitar than the vast majority of guitar company presidents or CEOs. More often than not, those guys don't even play. But I make sure each Morrison guitar gets a cadence pickup and see to it that it plays like butter. And what's really fulfilling is that I can finally get these guitars to just about anybody, because instead of $4,000 or $5,000, they're now a fraction of that price. Now, anyone that's ever bought a guitar knows you do usually get what you pay for, and I had good guitars when I was playing for a living, but one of these guitars would have changed my world, regardless of the cost. I can say firsthand that a high-dollar USA-made guitar with a factory or aftermarket pickup in it can do just fine in a real-world situation for just about anybody. But I can also say it really is empowering to equip yourself with a guitar designed from the ground up specifically to make music on a stage. And one might say, yeah, well, there's lots of guitars that come with pickups. That's true. But maybe whoever was designing the pickup wasn't considering the anatomy of the guitar, the bracing, the thickness of the top, the depth of the saddle slot, the dimensions of the bridge plate. Ultimately, how is the vibration of the top of that guitar influencing the pickup in terms of frequency, in terms of transient response, in terms of volume? You can manipulate the circuitry of the pickup to produce a certain frequency response, but I would argue very few have ever stopped to think, how can we design the guitar not just to sound good, but to produce mechanically the kind of influence we want the pickup to see, so that all the pickup has to do is be an amplifier. What kind of high-end, low-end, mid-range vibration is that transducer seeing, and what does it take to marry the two for the perfect performance? It's not just like sticking a good microphone in front of somebody's mouth and off you go. It's like changing their voice and then using something specifically tailored to their voice to amplify it. We don't simply throw in any pickup so that you can plug it in. The theory is not which pickup is best for this guitar. It's more of a domino effect. The player, the guitar, the pickup, the performance. And we want the pickup to be out of the way, not in the way. And our pickup and our guitar just breathes. People can still feel the acoustic quality when they plug it in and play it. Now, I don't want to paint the picture that our pickup only works in our guitars. That's not true. Again, we offer our pickup as a retrofit. It sounds great in a lot of guitars, but the guitar is not merely the sum of its parts. They all have their secrets, and there's a particular quality that does exist in some guitar, and in a fair amount of guitars, that exists in every single Morrison acoustic guitar that makes each guitar and its pickup work really harmoniously together and really something spectacular on stage. A trade secret, if you will. People buy guitars for a variety of different reasons. Some people buy guitars of one particular brand. I've known some folks to buy a guitar purely for the way it looks or what it's made out of. Some folks buy a guitar due to its rarity. But if that kind of stuff doesn't matter to you and you would categorize your guitar as merely serviceable, I can recommend one that you maybe haven't tried. Morrison guitars were in no way conceived with the current market in mind. We didn't look at the competition and say, we want to sell guitars too, so what's our design? What will the price point be? What features will it have? What pickup should we throw in it? What's our marketing strategy? Where can we find our place among the competition? A 14-year-old kid once looked at it as what's the best and what does it take? After much trial and error and years of real-world application, perfecting our craft and stepping way outside the box, the Morrison guitar was produced and perfected to be an instrument for working musicians, professionals, and enthusiasts alike. And the idea evolved into, okay, we've found it. How can we get one of these guitars in the hands of everybody that needs one? There are perfect machines that are designed to execute certain jobs perfectly. Tools that just make life easier. That's what Morrison guitars are.